The alarm started screaming just as Commander Jake Sullivan accessed the final data node in the Zephyrian Lunar Base's Quantum Research Center. 3 days of careful infiltration, mapping security protocols and learning patrol patterns, all blown because someone had upgraded their intrusion detection systems without updating the intelligence briefings that were supposed to keep him invisible. Nexus, emergency extraction, he subvocalized to his mission AI while his enhanced reflexes carried him toward the nearest ventilation shaft. Covers blown, hostiles converging, need immediate pickup. Negative on extraction, Nexus replied with the calm precision of someone delivering catastrophic news. Base-wide jamming fields active. No transport possible until you reach minimum safe distance of 2 kilometers. 2 kilometers through a facility designed like a three-dimensional maze, crawling with security forces who now knew exactly what they were looking for. Jake's enhanced hearing picked up the harmonics of Zephyrian tactical chatter, multiple squads coordinating a systematic search, sealing exits and establishing overlapping fields of fire. The ventilation shaft led him into residential quarters he hadn't mapped during reconnaissance. Zephyrian civilian areas followed architectural principles that human spatial reasoning found disorienting, flowing curves instead of right angles, rooms that seemed to expand and contract based on occupancy, corridors that branched according to organic rather than geometric logic. Human infiltrator confirmed in Section 7, came a voice through the walls, the words filtered through translation protocols that made every Zephyrian announcement sound like a death sentence. Seal all exits and begin room-by-room clearance. Subject is considered extremely dangerous. Jake pressed himself against a wall as footsteps echoed through the corridor outside, his combat systems calculating odds that weren't worth thinking about. Behind him, a door chimed softly, the kind of sound that meant someone was about to emerge from their quarters into a hallway full of hunting soldiers. The door slid open, and Jake found himself face to face with a young Zephyrian woman whose appearance marked her as civilian rather than military. Her elongated ears lacked the scarification that indicated warrior caste, her silver-blue skin held the pale luminescence of someone who spent most of her time in laboratory environments, and her eyes, violet depths that seemed to hold starlight, widened with surprise at finding a human operative in her doorway. She should have screamed. Every instinct of species survival, every year of propaganda about human aggression, every rational response to finding an enemy agent outside her private quarters should have made her alert the security forces who were actively hunting him. Instead, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength and yanked him into her room. "Don't make a sound, human," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made the words seem like music despite their urgency. The door slid shut behind them with barely a whisper, sealing them into quarters that smelled of ozone and exotic chemistry. Jake pressed himself against the wall where she positioned him, acutely aware of her body between him and the door, not just physically shielding him but actively choosing to place herself in danger for someone she'd never met. Through his enhanced hearing, he could detect her elevated heart rate, the controlled breathing of someone fighting to maintain calm under impossible stress. "Security sweep in progress," came a voice from the corridor, so close that Jake could feel the vibrations through the wall. "All residents remain in quarters until clearance is complete." The Zephyrian woman, scientist, based on the complex equations floating in holographic displays around her living space, remained motionless, her body still forming a barrier between Jake and discovery. Her eyes met his in the dimmed lighting, and he saw something there that human intelligence briefings had never mentioned about Zephyrian civilians, compassion that transcended species loyalty. "Dr. Velkris," came a voice from outside, accompanied by the distinctive harmonics of military authority. "Open for security verification." She moved away from Jake with fluid grace, positioning herself at the door controls while her free hand gestured for him to remain silent and hidden. When the door opened, she stood in the entrance with posture that blocked any view of the room's interior. "Squad Leader Thane," she said, her voice carrying the mild irritation of someone whose important work had been interrupted. "I trust this disruption is necessary." "Human spy in the residential section," came the reply in clipped military tones. "Have you observed any unusual activity in the past hour?" "I've been focused on quantum resonance calculations," she replied with exactly the right amount of academic distraction. The dimensional matrix I'm working on requires precise mathematical modeling that doesn't allow for observing corridor activity. Through his position against the wall, Jake could see her hand steady despite the enormous risk she was taking. Her lie came easily, naturally, as though she'd been preparing for this moment without knowing why. Any unauthorized access to your quarters? Squad leader Thane pressed, his harmonic suggesting he was running through standard interrogation protocols. None, she said firmly. My door has been sealed since the beginning of my shift 6 hours ago. If you'd like to verify through base security logs. That won't be necessary, Doctor. Continue with your research. Report any irregularities immediately. The door slid shut, and Jake found himself alone with someone who had just committed treason against her own species to protect a man whose government considered her people enemies. In the silence that followed, he could hear her breathing return gradually to normal rates while her enhanced senses monitored the security patrol's progress down the corridor. Why, he whispered, the question carrying weight that extended far beyond immediate circumstances. She turned from the door to study his face with violet eyes that seemed to see past human features to something more fundamental. Because, she said quietly, her harmonics carrying depths of meaning that human vocal cords couldn't produce, some things are more important than the artificial boundaries our governments have drawn between consciousness and consciousness. Through the walls, they could hear security forces continuing their search, growing more systematic and thorough as they realized their quarry had somehow evaded the initial sweep. Dr. Velkris moved to her research station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed equations Jake's enhanced education could barely comprehend. Quantum dimensional mechanics, she explained, apparently noticing his confused study of her work. Theoretical applications for instantaneous matter transport across spacetime barriers. Teleportation, Jake said, understanding flooding through him as he grasped the implications of her research. Among other applications, she confirmed, her tone carrying the careful neutrality of someone discussing work that had troubling implications. Though I suspect my government is more interested in the weapon's potential than the peaceful applications. As footsteps echoed past her door again, Jake realized that his random encounter with Dr. Lyanna Velkris might be the most important intelligence breakthrough of his career, not because of what she knew about Zephyrian military capabilities, but because of what she represented. A bridge between species that could choose cooperation over conquest, understanding over hatred. Dr. Velkris, he said quietly, testing her name in human pronunciation. Lyanna, she corrected gently, settling into a chair that positioned her to monitor both the door and his location against the wall. If we're going to commit treason together, we might as well use given names. In the distance, alarms continued to wail, but for the first time since his cover had been blown, Jake felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. Sometimes the most important victories came not from successful espionage but from unexpected encounters with individuals brave enough to choose conscience over loyalty. The security sweeps intensified as Zephyrian forces realized their human intruder had vanished from their detection grid without triggering any exit sensors. Through the walls of Lyanna's quarters, Jake could hear the systematic progression of searchers conducting increasingly thorough examinations of each residential unit. Thermal imaging shows residual heat signatures inconsistent with single occupancy, came a voice from the corridor, too close for comfort. Expanding search parameters to include concealment scenarios. Lyanna moved with quiet efficiency to her environmental controls, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that Jake's enhanced vision could barely track. Quantum heat dispersal, she explained in whispers, adjusting settings that would scatter his thermal signature across the room's entire surface area. My research into dimensional mechanics has practical applications for energy redistribution. You've been planning for this, Jake observed, watching her implement countermeasures with practiced ease. Planning for the possibility, she corrected, activating additional systems that would mask his bioelectric signature from Zephyrian detection equipment. I've been having doubts about the direction of my research. Contingency planning seemed prudent. Through his enhanced hearing, Jake detected the approach of another search team, this one moving with the methodical precision of specialists trained in advanced counterinfiltration techniques. Their equipment would be significantly more sophisticated than standard security sensors. Advanced sweep team approaching, he whispered, his military training automatically calculating concealment options that were rapidly diminishing to zero. I know, Lyanna replied, her violet eyes holding steady determination as she moved to a storage alcove that Jake hadn't noticed during his initial assessment of the room. Emergency protocols. She produced a device that looked like crystalline jewelry but hummed with the distinctive harmonics of advanced technology. Personal displacement field generator, she explained, activating controls that made the air around them shimmer with barely visible energy. Experimental design for laboratory safety applications. What does it do? Jake asked, though he was already moving toward the position she indicated with her hand. Creates a localized dimensional distortion that displaces matter slightly out of phase with normal spacetime, she said, her tone carrying the careful precision of someone explaining technology that barely worked under ideal conditions. To external sensors, this space will appear completely empty. The displacement field activated just as specialized detection equipment began scanning through the walls. Jake felt a strange sensation. Not quite dizziness, not quite nausea, but a fundamental wrongness that suggested his body was existing partially outside normal reality. Side effects, he asked, fighting the disorientation that came with existing in dimensional flux. Unknown, Lyanna admitted, her own voice sounding distant despite her proximity. I've never tested it with human physiology. The field was designed for Zephyrian genetic markers. Through the walls, they could hear the advanced search team conducting scans that should have detected any living being within 50 meters. But the readings their equipment returned showed only empty space, a young scientist's quarters occupied by nothing more dangerous than theoretical physics equations and exotic chemistry experiments. Dr. Velkris, open for advanced verification, came the voice of someone with significantly more authority than the previous searchers. Lyanna deactivated the displacement field with careful timing, allowing them to phase back into normal reality just as her door chimed. Jake pressed himself into the alcove where she'd positioned him, noting how her quarters were arranged to create natural blind spots from the entrance. Security Director Vex, she said as the door opened, her tone carrying exactly the right mixture of respect and mild annoyance. I trust this extensive search is yielding results. Human spy remains at large within residential section, Director Vex replied, his harmonics carrying the frustrated precision of someone whose reputation depended on finding an enemy agent who had apparently vanished. Advanced scans indicate biological residue consistent with human presence in this general area. General area covers 37 residential units, Lyanna observed with the logical precision of a scientist pointing out flawed methodology. Hardly conclusive evidence for searching individual quarters multiple times. Jake could see a portion of the corridor through the doorway, noting the sophisticated scanning equipment the security team was deploying. Military-grade sensors that should have been capable of detecting his presence through almost any concealment method. Your research involves dimensional mechanics, Director Vex said, his tone shifting to something that might have been suspicion. Could such technology be used to conceal human infiltrators? Theoretical possibility, Lyanna agreed readily, apparently unbothered by the implications. Though practical application would require equipment far beyond anything available outside advanced research facilities. The power requirements alone would exceed residential unit capabilities by several orders of magnitude. And you've been working on such research? Theoretical frameworks only, she replied with the casual dismissiveness of someone discussing purely academic exercises. My focus is on peaceful applications, matter transport, dimensional storage, energy redistribution. Military applications would require entirely different technological approaches. Through the doorway, Jake could see Director Vex studying her with the intense focus of someone trained to detect deception. But Lyanna's responses carried the ring of technical truth. Her research was focused on peaceful applications, and concealing human spies was theoretically possible but practically beyond current technological limitations. Continue your research, Doctor, Director Vex said finally. But report any unusual readings or unexpected results from your dimensional experiments. Of course, Director. Scientific accuracy requires complete data reporting. The door slid shut, and Jake found himself marveling at how easily Lyanna had deflected suspicion while providing information that was technically accurate but completely misleading. Her research was focused on peaceful applications. She simply hadn't mentioned that she'd been secretly developing defensive countermeasures to prevent her work from being weaponized. "How long can we maintain this?" he asked, emerging from the alcove as her sensors confirmed the search team's departure. "Hours, possibly days," she replied, settling back at her research station with movements that suggested she was more comfortable in crisis than during normal circumstances. "But you need to understand what you've stumbled into, Jake. This isn't just about hiding you from security forces." Her use of his name, which he hadn't given her, made him look up sharply. "How do you know who I am?" "Commander Jake Sullivan, Terran Federation Intelligence, Specialist in Deep Infiltration and Technology Assessment," she said calmly, calling up holographic displays that showed detailed intelligence files. "Your mission parameters included assessment of our quantum weapons research program." Jake's enhanced reflexes automatically calculated combat options while his mind processed the implications of blown operational security. "Your Zephyrian intelligence." "I'm a scientist who's been monitoring intelligence traffic about my research," Lyanna corrected, her tone carrying neither threat nor triumph. "Your government is as interested in my work as mine is. The difference is that I've been looking for ways to prevent it from being weaponized while yours wants to steal it for military applications." The revelation hung between them like a weapon neither wanted to use. Jake studied her face, using every technique his training had provided for detecting deception, and found only sincerity mixed with something that might have been hope. "So what now?" he asked, settling into a position that kept him ready for action while acknowledging that violence would serve neither of their interests. "Now we discuss why a Zephyrian scientist is protecting a human spy," Lyanna said, her violet eyes meeting his with steady directness. "And whether two people from opposing sides can find common ground in preventing the war both our governments seem determined to start." As search teams continued their methodical progression through other sections of the residential quarters, Jake realized that his mission had evolved beyond intelligence gathering into something far more complex and potentially far more important than anyone in Terran Federation Command had anticipated. The hours that followed created an enforced intimacy that neither Jake nor Lyanna had expected, confined together in quarters designed for a single occupant while security forces maintained elevated alert status throughout the base. As the immediate danger of discovery receded, they found themselves drawn into conversations that revealed how extensively both their governments had concealed the true scope of the impending conflict. "Your intelligence was partially correct," Lyanna said, calling up holographic displays that showed classified Zephyrian military planning documents. "We are developing quantum weapons capable of devastating entire planets. But the timeline your briefing suggested is accelerated by approximately 18 months. Jake studied the tactical projections with growing alarm, his enhanced military training allowing him to comprehend strategic implications that painted a picture of civilization-ending warfare. First strike capability against human colonies. Complete sterilization of inhabited worlds without rendering them uninhabitable for subsequent colonization, she confirmed, her harmonics carrying disgust at the clinical efficiency of the proposed genocide. "My research into dimensional mechanics provides the targeting precision necessary for such selective destruction." "And you're having second thoughts about contributing to mass murder," Jake said, noting the way her violet eyes darkened when discussing her work's military applications. "I became a scientist to explore the mysteries of consciousness and reality," Lyanna replied, manipulating the displays to show her original research proposals, elegant theoretical frameworks for understanding the fundamental nature of existence. "Dimensional mechanics could revolutionize how we understand the universe, open pathways to knowledge that transcend the petty territorial disputes between our species. Instead, they want you to build planet killers. They want me to perfect targeting systems that can eliminate specific genetic markers while leaving infrastructure intact," she said, her tone carrying the weight of someone forced to pervert their life's work into tools of atrocity. "Weapons that kill humans but spare Zephyrians, allowing for rapid colonization of conquered territories." Jake felt cold certainty settling in his stomach as he processed the implications. Ethnic cleansing on an interstellar scale. Precisely, Lyanna confirmed, then accessed additional files that showed human military preparations. Though your people's response suggests they're planning similar atrocities in reverse. The intelligence she displayed made Jake's enhanced reflexes tense with recognition, classified Terran Federation documents that detailed weapons research aimed at exploiting Zephyrian physiological vulnerabilities. Bioweapons designed to target alien neural chemistry, quantum disruptors calibrated for non-human consciousness patterns, strategic planning that treated entire Zephyrian worlds as acceptable collateral damage. How did you access classified Federation files? He asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. The same dimensional monitoring techniques that allowed me to detect your mission parameters, she explained, calling up technical specifications that showed technology beyond anything in human understanding. Consciousness exists partially outside normal spacetime. With proper equipment, it's possible to observe thought patterns across dimensional barriers. You've been reading our minds, Jake said, the realization carrying implications that extended far beyond his current situation. I've been monitoring military planning from both sides, Lyanna corrected, her tone carrying the precision of someone making important distinctions. Not personal thoughts or individual consciousness, but the collective strategic thinking that drives policy decisions. What I discovered horrified me. The holographic displays shifted to show comparative analyses of both species' war preparations, parallel development of weapons designed not just for victory but for the complete elimination of opposing civilizations. Two peoples rushing toward mutual annihilation while their leaders convinced them that survival required the total destruction of the other. Neither side is planning for victory, Jake realized, studying the strategic projections with growing understanding. You're both planning for extinction-level warfare that eliminates any possibility of coexistence. Correct, Lyanna said, settling beside him in the small space her quarters provided. Your government believes Zephyrian expansion threatens human survival. Mine believes human aggression makes coexistence impossible. Both are preparing for wars that will end with one species extinct and the other so damaged that they'll be vulnerable to conquest by any surviving civilization. Third-party intervention, Jake said, his intelligence training providing frameworks for understanding conflicts that served interests beyond the apparent combatants. Someone benefits from human Zephyrian mutual destruction. Several someones, Lyanna confirmed, accessing data files that showed intelligence reports about other spacefaring civilizations. At least 3 major empires that would profit from our mutual elimination, gaining access to territories and resources currently contested between our peoples. The scope of the manipulation was staggering, 2 species being maneuvered into genocidal warfare by external forces that wanted them both eliminated as potential competitors. Jake felt his understanding of the conflict shifting from territorial dispute to existential conspiracy involving players whose motivations extended far beyond the human Zephyrian border regions. So what do we do about it? He asked, though he suspected Lyanna had already been working on answers long before his accidental appearance in her quarters. We prove that cooperation between our species is possible, she said, activating displays that showed her unauthorized research into peaceful applications of dimensional mechanics. I've been developing technology that could transform both our civilizations, instantaneous communication across any distance, matter transport that makes interstellar colonization practical, energy systems that eliminate resource scarcity. Technology that makes territorial wars obsolete, Jake realized, studying her work with growing excitement. Technology that makes our current conflict meaningless, she agreed. If both species have access to unlimited resources and infinite space for expansion, the territorial disputes that drive current tensions become irrelevant. Through the walls, they could hear security patrols maintaining their searches, but with decreased urgency as the hours passed without locating their elusive human infiltrator. Jake found himself studying Lyanna's face in the dim lighting, noting the determination that marked someone who had found purpose beyond personal safety. You're taking enormous risks, he observed. Protecting me, sharing classified information, developing unauthorized technology. If your people discover what you're doing, they'll execute me for treason, she finished calmly. Just as your people would execute you for collaborating with enemy scientists. But some things are more important than personal survival. Like preventing interspecies genocide. Like proving that consciousness can choose cooperation over conquest, she said, her violet eyes meeting his with intensity that seemed to bridge the gap between human and alien perspectives. We represent something unprecedented, Jake, individuals from opposing sides who share common values despite our government's mutual hatred. As the search teams gradually moved to other sections of the base, Jake realized that his mission had transformed from intelligence gathering into something far more significant. He and Lyanna weren't just hiding from security forces, they were developing the foundation for an entirely new relationship between their species, one based on shared principles rather than territorial competition. "What's the next step?" he asked, settling into acceptance of circumstances that extended far beyond anything his training had prepared him for. "We test whether human and Zephyrian consciousness can achieve true integration," Lyanna said, activating equipment that filled her quarters with harmonic resonances that seemed to vibrate through his enhanced neural pathways. "And we discover if two minds working together can accomplish what neither species has achieved alone." The quantum fields beginning to form around them suggested that whatever happened next would transform both their lives in ways that transcended the artificial boundaries their governments had drawn between enemy and ally, human and alien, individual survival and species cooperation. The final confrontation came at 0347 hours when Security Director Vex returned with a full tactical team and equipment designed to penetrate any concealment technology the residential quarters might contain. Through her monitoring systems, Lyanna detected their approach with enough warning to implement emergency protocols that would determine whether her months of preparation had been adequate for this moment. "They're bringing quantum resonance scanners," she said, her fingers dancing across control interfaces with practiced efficiency. "Technology that can detect consciousness itself, regardless of dimensional displacement or energy masking." Jake watched her activate systems he hadn't known existed within her quarters, equipment that transformed the modest residential space into something resembling an advanced research laboratory. "How long do we have?" "Approximately 90 seconds before they begin scanning," Lyanna replied, accessing a device that looked like crystalline artwork but hummed with dangerous energies. "This is your choice, Jake. I can attempt to transport you to safety using experimental technology that's never been tested with human physiology, or you can surrender and hope Federation diplomatic protocols protect you from Zephyrian interrogation techniques." "What are the risks of using your experimental transport?" he asked, though his military training suggested that surrender to alien forces was rarely the optimal tactical choice. "Unknown," she admitted with scientific honesty. "The dimensional displacement process is calibrated for Zephyrian neural architecture. Human consciousness might not survive the transition intact, or the process might create quantum entanglement between our minds that could have unpredictable consequences." Through the walls, Jake could hear the tactical team setting up scanning equipment designed to penetrate any concealment method available to civilian scientists. Director Vex's voice carried the methodical certainty of someone whose professional reputation depended on finding evidence of treasonous collaboration. "Quantum entanglement," Jake said, focusing on the implications of what she'd mentioned. "What kind of unpredictable consequences?" "Permanent psychic connection between human and Zephyrian consciousness," Lyanna explained, her violet eyes holding his with intensity that suggested she was offering more than just emergency transportation. "Shared thoughts, emotions, sensory experiences. Complete integration of mental processes across species barriers. And you're willing to risk that to save someone you met 6 hours ago?" "I'm willing to risk that to prove that cooperation between our species is possible," she corrected, activating preliminary systems that made the air around them shimmer with barely contained energies. "What we accomplish together could be more important than what either of us achieves alone." The scanning equipment outside began its systematic analysis of the residential quarters, energy signatures that would detect any living consciousness within the specified search grid. Jake felt the devices probing through walls and defensive systems with technologies that made human detection equipment seem primitive by comparison. "Do it," he said, moving to the position she indicated beside the experimental transport device. "Jake," Lyanna said quietly, her harmonics carrying emotions that human vocal cords couldn't replicate, "if this works, we'll be connected permanently. Our minds will share experiences, memories, perspectives. You need to understand what you're accepting. I understand that two people working together might be able to prevent a war that will destroy both our civilizations, he replied, watching her make final calibrations to equipment that represented the pinnacle of theoretical physics. That seems worth any personal risk. The transport device activated just as Director Vex scanners began detecting anomalous energy signatures within Lioness quarters. Reality twisted around them, dimensional barriers becoming permeable as the experimental technology attempted to translate human consciousness through spacetime configurations designed for alien neural architecture. Jake felt his awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual thought, his mind suddenly sharing space with consciousness structured according to entirely different evolutionary principles. Through connections that transcended physical proximity, he experienced Lioness memories. Centuries of scientific education, growing horror at her work's military applications, desperate determination to find alternatives to the genocidal warfare their governments were planning. The transport completed with a sensation like stepping through liquid starlight into a reality where the laws of physics operated according to different principles. Jake materialized in what appeared to be a hidden research facility, surrounded by equipment that suggested Lioness had been preparing for exactly this contingency for months. "Welcome to my real laboratory," she said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated directly in his enhanced consciousness through their quantum entanglement. "Where I've been developing technology that could make war between our species obsolete." Through their shared awareness, Jake could perceive the scope of her unauthorized research. Communication systems that enabled instant contact across any distance, matter transporters that made interstellar colonization practical for both species, energy generators that eliminated resource scarcity as a source of territorial conflict. This could change everything, he realized, his understanding of her work now enhanced by alien perspectives that revealed implications his purely human training had missed. "This will change everything," Lioness corrected, activating communication systems that connected them to monitoring networks spanning both human and Zephyrian space. "But only if we can convince our respective governments that cooperation serves their interests better than mutual annihilation." Through their quantum link, Jake felt her accessing intelligence networks that revealed the true scope of their civilization's rush toward war. Military preparations on both sides that would begin the shooting within weeks, weapons deployments that made diplomatic solutions increasingly impossible as positions hardened into irreconcilable opposition. "We need to stop this," he said, the urgency flowing through their shared consciousness with intensity that made individual survival seem irrelevant compared to species preservation. "We will stop this," Lioness replied, her determination resonating through neural pathways that now carried both human creativity and Zephyrian analytical precision. "Because together, we can accomplish what neither species could achieve alone." As they began transmitting evidence of the third-party manipulation that had driven their peoples toward genocidal warfare, Jake realized that their accidental meeting had become something far more significant than espionage or counterintelligence. They had created the first true integration of human and Zephyrian consciousness, proving that cooperation between their species wasn't just possible but natural when individuals chose understanding over hatred. "Together," he said, the word carrying harmonics borrowed from Zephyrian communication protocols. "Together," Lioness agreed, her response resonating through quantum fields that connected their minds across every barrier except the ones their governments chose to maintain. Through the hidden facility's viewports, they could see stars that had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall, indifferent to the small dramas of individual species yet somehow complicit in the cosmic forces that brought conscious minds together across impossible distances. Their partnership would challenge everything both civilizations believed about natural enemies and inevitable conflicts, but it would also offer proof that some connections were powerful enough to transform hatred into understanding, fear into respect, and the artificial boundaries between species into opportunities for cooperation that could benefit every conscious being in known space. The woman who had hidden him in her room had become something far more important than protector or ally. She had become the other half of a consciousness that spanned species barriers, proving that the universe had always intended for minds to find each other across the artificial divisions that politics and fear had created. "The quantum entanglement is stabilizing," Lioness said, her awareness now flowing seamlessly between her individual thoughts and their shared consciousness. I can feel your human perspective integrating with Zephyrian analytical frameworks. We're becoming something unprecedented. Through their mental link, Jake experienced the world through senses evolved on an alien world, perception of electromagnetic spectrums invisible to human vision, awareness of dimensional fluctuations that human neural architecture couldn't process, emotional ranges that expanded beyond anything his species had developed. But rather than overwhelming his human consciousness, the alien perspectives enhanced his understanding in ways that made complex problems seem suddenly solvable. I can see the solution pathways, he said, his enhanced awareness now capable of processing strategic scenarios with the combined creativity of human intuition and Zephyrian logical precision. The evidence we're transmitting won't just expose the third-party manipulation, it'll demonstrate what our species can accomplish when we combine our unique capabilities. Human innovation guided by Zephyrian analytical depth, Liana agreed, her excitement resonating through neural pathways that now carried both their perspectives simultaneously. We're not just proving that cooperation is possible, we're showing them what they'll lose if they choose mutual destruction instead. Their communication to both governments transmitted on quantum frequencies that ensured immediate delivery despite the vast distances involved. The message contained not just evidence of external manipulation, but live demonstration of what human-Zephyrian collaboration could achieve, real-time problem-solving that neither species could accomplish alone, technological breakthroughs that emerged from combining different evolutionary approaches to understanding reality. Response incoming, Jake announced, his consciousness now capable of monitoring communication networks across multiple star systems simultaneously. Both Federation Command and the Zephyrian High Council are requesting immediate verification of our claims. Then we give them verification they can't ignore, Liana said, activating the dimensional communication array she'd been developing in secret. We invite representatives from both governments to witness what integrated consciousness can accomplish. The facility around them transformed as hidden systems activated, revealing the true scope of her unauthorized research. What had appeared to be a modest laboratory expanded into a research complex that rivaled anything either government had produced, filled with technologies that represented the next stage of civilization development for both species. How long have you been planning this? Jake asked, his awareness expanding to encompass the full scope of her preparations. Since I first realized my government intended to weaponize my research, she replied, their shared consciousness allowing him to experience her months of careful preparation. I knew that preventing genocidal warfare would require more than diplomatic protests, it would require proof that our species could achieve more together than apart. Through their quantum link, they began coordinating responses to incoming communications from both governments. Federation Command demanded Jake's immediate extraction and debriefing, while the Zephyrian High Council ordered Liana's arrest for treason and unauthorized research. Both responses demonstrated exactly the kind of territorial thinking that had driven their civilizations toward mutual destruction. They're not ready to accept what we represent, Jake observed, monitoring official reactions that ranged from skepticism to outright hostility. Then we'll have to show them, Liana said, accessing systems that would broadcast their next demonstration across both civilizations simultaneously. Sometimes the only way to change minds is to prove that the impossible is not only possible but inevitable. The dimensional broadcast they initiated reached every major population center in human and Zephyrian space, transmitting live imagery of their integrated consciousness solving problems that had stymied both species' greatest minds. Resource allocation dilemmas that dissolved when approached with combined human creativity and Zephyrian analytical precision. Territorial disputes that became irrelevant when dimensional technology made unlimited expansion possible for both civilizations. We're not asking them to trust each other, Jake realized, understanding their strategy through perspectives that now encompassed both human and alien approaches to diplomacy. We're showing them that they can achieve their goals more effectively through cooperation than through conquest. Exactly, Liana confirmed, their shared awareness now coordinating responses to hundreds of incoming communications from scientists, military officers, and political leaders across both civilizations. We're offering them something better than victory, we're offering them transcendence. As responses flooded in from across known space, Jake felt their quantum entanglement deepening into something that transcended mere psychic connection. They had become living proof that consciousness could evolve beyond the limitations of individual species, that the universe held possibilities neither civilization had imagined while trapped in their mutual hatred. Whatever happens next, he said, their merged awareness encompassing potentials that ranged from immediate transformation of interspecies relations to gradual acceptance over generations, we've changed everything. We've proven that the barriers between our peoples exist only in our minds. And minds, Lyanna replied, her harmonics now perfectly synchronized with his human speech patterns through their quantum link, can always choose to change. Through the facility's viewports, stars that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations seemed to pulse with approval as two minds that should have been enemies discovered they were meant to be partners. Their accidental meeting had become the foundation for a new form of consciousness that transcended every boundary except the ones individuals chose to maintain, proving that sometimes the most important revolutions began not with grand declarations but with simple acts of mercy between strangers who chose to see each other as people rather than enemies. The future stretched before them, vast with possibility and bright with the promise that when minds met across impossible distances, understanding could triumph over fear, cooperation could overcome conquest, and love could bridge any gap between souls willing to recognize their fundamental connection to the consciousness that linked all thinking beings in the cosmos.